Hey Howard,
Hello, hello. How are you doing, Michael?
doing well. How about you?
I'm really well, thanks. Thanks very much for speaking to me.
Oh, absolutely, my pleasure.
Uh-huh. Thanks very much for terrifying the hell out of me as well. I just recently finished. I've just finished the last couple of chapters just before. I wanted to kind of say the last bit just before the interview, just to kind of keep it all fresh in my memory. So thanks for scaring the heck out of me at the end. I mean, it really takes. I don't want to give anything away, but it kind of really does take a turn that I wasn't expecting at all, and kind of it's very. It was just without giving it away. It wasn't what it didn't go where I was expecting to go, and it really kind of it's one of those books where you finish it and you need to kind of sit down for half an hour and kind of process that sudden shift in kind of where the story went. So yeah, it was really good.
Thank you so much. I mean that's basically what I was hoping for. So that's good news.
Uh-huh.
I've I've noticed a couple of when I wrote the ending, I felt like it was going to be a little bit divisive, but you know, sometimes sometimes that's the way it should be. That's how I thought about it at the time. And so I've had several people tell me they loved the ending very, very much, and they're so far outnumbering the people who didn't like the ending. So
Mhm.
it's
Yeah.
been great.
Uh-huh. Yeah, I mean, I don't obviously don't want to talk about the ending too much, but it's yeah, I can imagine why it will be divisive. But it's all I think that works in its favor because I mean, I don't know if you've seen the film Weapons, but that's kind of like that's not
Mhm.
it doesn't end with a kind of an open ending, but it kind of sparks a debate, and I think this ending because it's kind of open ended in a way, I'm sure it's going to spark quite a bit of debate rather than kind of conflict or people kind of not liking it because of the ending. I think it kind of might open more of kind of a similar kind of debate as the film in the story kind of does as well. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I can definitely see that. Well, I like everything else, I'm nervously waiting to find out
Yeah.
what it's going to be like.
Huh? So I mean, obviously the story itself it dates back kind of the seed dates back to a short story that you had now. Was it Greener Pastures was kind of an anthology book, not different short stories. And
Yes.
I think you said that you found out much like the October film haunt. You found out that it was doing quite well this story because of the internet. Now you kind of found out because of what people were saying on the internet. So I'm quite curious how this short story kind of came to be that you decided to take it further afield and write a novel about it. I understand also that Adam Neville, I'm a great fan of Adam Neville as well. He was very instrumental as well from the beginning in helping this kind of turn into a novel. No.
Yeah, I think Adam planted the first seed. He read Greener Pastures because it came out way back in 2016. I think he read it later that year and posted about it on social media. And he mentioned that he wished that story had been a novel. And so I didn't think much about it at the time, but before too much time passed, I kept coming back to that in my mind because, like you mentioned, that story was the favorite of a lot of people. And to this day, I still see it brought up on Reddit and, you know, Twitter and whatever from time to time. And I had been thinking about what my first novel would be. I was already interested in something that had kind of a meta horror angle, something that just would comment on the internet and the way things go viral and urban legends and that just kind of whole pot full of influences swirling around in my head. And like the October film haunt would be perfect for this. And it's that got the wheels turning. And so I didn't want to expand the story into a novel because the original story is it's an homage to found footage movies and things of that nature, epistolary storytelling and so forth. But it didn't really, it was a cosmic horror story at its heart. It was kind of a Lovecraftian sort of thing. And I didn't want a full-length novel to be Lovecraftian, at least not my first one. So I decided it would be really cool to, instead of expanding the original story, to just kind of fold it into a different story with a different film that the book revolves around. And I even decided upon a different group of characters that make up the group, the October Film Hunt. So at that point, I was kind of going crazy with all these thoughts, and I just, just jumped into it. But yeah, that original story, I wanted to do justice to it. I wanted everybody who loved it, I wanted them to come into the novel and find the same sorts of elements, the same sorts of inspirations and callbacks and references and, you know, meta horror cleverness, I guess you could say, in the way that the Scream movies tried to do that.
Yeah. Yeah, they definitely had some kind of very Scream meta moments in it. Yeah, definitely. Yeah.
Right. And, people who love horror like I do, they they want to, it's fun to see yourself in a story like that. And, the main character in the October Film Hunt, it was so passionate about horror, at least she was until the original events happened that have led her to her current place. But she was a huge, huge horror fan, and I'm a huge horror fan, and I just want all the other huge horror fans reading it to just really feel that passion come across. And I think that's maybe the ultimate goal of meta horror is just whether it's winking at the reader or the viewer, or it's like trying to dig a little deeper and examine things. It should be fun to see yourself and to see all these things you love kind of brought to life.
Mhm. Yeah, I mean that was I really enjoyed the fact that it was, especially the main character, who was actually she's called yeah, in the book it says that her parents kind of by accident named her after a very famous horror character, no, a final girl. Was there any? I don't know if you want to give any of that away, but was there any specific reason why that specific final girl was kind of had a similar ring name? And was there any specific reason why you wanted it to be so kind of have so much love for the horror genre, but at the same time, really, she's kind of trying to lead a life where she's trying to kind of completely block it out of her life at the same time.
Yeah, she has blocked it out. She's left it all behind. Just to give the listeners or viewers a little bit of context, she and two of her friends were in a group called the October Film Hunt, and they would camp out at the filming locations of cult favorite horror movies and such, and blog about their experiences. And they kind of blew up and became really big horror influencers. And that it all fell apart and terrible things happened when they spent the night in a cemetery that was used in the filming of this movie called Proof of Demons. And someone died, and then someone else died, and she just had to leave it all behind. So now we're at 10 years later when the story really starts. And she still misses it, and she's even a decade later still trying to push it away. And when horror comes back into her life against her will, she has this push and pull dynamic playing out in her head where she part of her wants to welcome it in because the best years of her life for in most ways um were centered around her love for horror. So it's something she reluctantly gave up, and she misses it, but she also has all these regrets from these terrible things that happened. And so she's trying to push it away at the same time. So there's a lot of tension inside of her for that reason. And as far as her name is concerned, it was kind of an accident because I named her Jorie after one of my favorite poets, Jorie Graham. And I was trying to think of a last name for her. This was in chapter one when I'm trying to think of a name. And I was like, just happened to think of Laurie Strode from Halloween, which, she's Sydney Prescott is my favorite final girl
Right.
from Scream. But Laurie would definitely be my second one. Just absolute complete classic, of course. And like, huh. So I just came up with the name Stroud, and it was like Jorie Stroud. And then, her parents aren't horror buffs, so I just, she comments at one point in the book that her parents named her Jorie and then accidentally named her in a rhyming way after Laurie Strode. And it was just yet another little kind of Easter egg I could throw in there.
Uh-huh. I don't want to give anything. I don't know how much you can give away, but I felt that there were quite a few very explicit Halloween references in the story. Were they did they come? I mean, you said that you kind of came up with the name very early on. I'm curious whether the kind of the Halloween um kind of nods to Halloween came because of the name, or whether kind of things that you already had an idea for in the story. Kind of, I'm talking about the sheets. I don't want to give it away, but I'm talking about kind of the sheets and things like that.
Yeah, the sheets come into the book pretty early on, so I could pretty much talk about those a little bit. Yeah, I mean, Halloween's one of my touchstones. So, when I'm thinking about what I'm writing, planning ahead, Halloween's going to be one of the pillars that this structure I'm building is sitting on top of, along with, Scream. And then, even though some more recent examples, something like Hereditary is one of my pillars. And I was obviously trying to think in terms of horror movies when I was constructing this book and pulling all my various inspirations together. So yeah, Halloween, that scene where Laurie looks out the window and sees Michael Myers with the sheet draped over him, and then, or no, he's standing near the sheets, and then later he has a sheet draped over himself.
Yeah, with the
The,
glasses on. Yeah, that's a great scene. Yeah.
then there's the classic kitchen knife, in Scream, they're more like hunting knives. And then I feel like every knife-based killer in a famous horror movie sort of has a signature style knife, but it's also a very common knife. So I went just super simple with this and just chose like a kitchen knife because that felt a little more Michael Myers to me. And there are a couple of other smaller references that are pretty obviously Halloween related to. There are some from Scream. Uh, I think there's even one from A Nightmare on Elm Street. But but yeah, a lot of it wasn't intentional. It was just they were just come out in the moment,
Uh-huh.
and it's because this book was about my love of horror movies and horror in general, really. But since the book revolves around a film, the horror movies were just pouring out of me while I was writing the book. I didn't even have to rewatch many movies. They're just a part of my DNA at this
Yeah.
point. So, and I just
Uh-huh.
wanted them to come out organically, however they wanted to. And there are lots that I cut because, you can't overdo something. So, but
Yeah. Uh-huh. No, I mean, the reason I ask is because the members of the October Film Hunt, because they are so they're just kind of it's all ingrained in their brain. This watch so many movies and then kind of their love for the horror genre is just kind of brimming, and they can't help it. So whenever kind of they get to a scene in whenever they get to a situation in the book that feels like a scene from a movie. I love the fact that where it gets really meta is they kind of they foresee, they anticipate, they're very anticipatory, and they can kind of imagine how they're supposed to act in this specific situation, and you kind of upend that in quite a few moments. So I'm quite curious how you went about leaning into these genre tropes, but then upending it, um, but making sure that they would probably be satisfactory for fans of the genre, because, like you said, that it's very easy to upset fans of the genre if you try and kind of try to get too sophisticated with the way that you want to upend tropes, if you know what I mean.
yeah, well, there's Randy in the original Scream movies, the first two. He's already done this so that I didn't have to think about it too much. He kind of talks about how horror movies have trained him. And so in the world of Scream, he is somewhat able to react in real time to a horror movie scenario because he's watched so many horror movies and examined them and thought about them and picked them apart and, down to the rules of what you should do in a given moment. But yeah, I kind of wanted to touch on the fact that most of the characters in the book are so immersed in horror fandom and just a pure joy for it that when a when their real life kind of becomes a horror movie, they would naturally, in that chaos of thought that occurs during a life or death situation, they would kind of start thinking like a horror movie. And that mindset would be warring with like the real life human fight or flight type of mentality that's going on. So, and I tried to wonder what I myself would think in certain moments like that. Like, you don't want your character pausing to reflect upon a horror movie. You don't want that to unfold in a way that feels really inorganic or
Yeah, clunky. Yeah.
unnatural because that's kind of silly. But, at the same time, the mind is working at the speed of bullets. It's just whirling around, thought after thought, just clashing into each other. So I did want these little touchstones to be in there. It's like someone running away from a bad guy and they're thinking, I can't go in that direction because I've seen too many movies where it, ends really badly for the character. So it was kind of an interesting balance to try to keep in mind because these aren't just people going through a horror fiction experience. There are people who are well read in horror fiction and very steeped in it going through that situation. So I just believe that there would be real thoughts. And, you mentioned tropes and trying to upend them. One of the big drivers of the book was I basically wanted to take the slasher element because I love slashers, you know, um, and blend it with something I don't think it's blended with very often, which is the occult horror movie.
Right.
And again, I mentioned those pillars earlier, and Scream was one, Halloween was one, and Hereditary was one. It was like there really haven't been many slasher stories where this or horror stories where the slasher and the occult slash demonology aspect kind of get
Yeah.
equal billing.
There was also a bit of J horror as well that I'd never kind of felt kind of blended in with slasher tropes before either. Yeah.
Right. So I just kind of wanted to take these two things that feel like oil and water and try to mix them together to see if they could coexist. And it also opened up this possibility to have more of a threat in the book because the characters have to worry about two different types of threats coming toward them, so to speak. Trying to be really vague here, but that was really interesting to me. So the characters really feel like they really have to draw on their horror experience, so to speak, in order to understand this aspect. But then wait, there's also this other aspect that's more supernatural and more demon based or what have you.
Mhm. I also,
You
I mean, sorry, are we okay to talk a little bit about Coleman because I want to kind of there's this other perspective that we see, which is it's kind of very different to Jorie's story. Kind of it addresses very much kind of going through the process of kind of maybe of facing death. I want to try and be as vague as possible as well. Um, I'm quite curious why you decided to have kind of Jory as this final girl, and at the same time have this parallel story of kind of an older gentleman who's kind of grappling with coming to terms with what death might be like.
Yeah,
I just don't want to give anything away about his particular story, but he's kind of it deals with a lot of things that kind of an older person might try to go through as they're kind of getting older.
yes. Yeah, his name's Coleman Smith, and I think of him as my secondary protagonist. He definitely gets less screen time, but there are five point of view characters total because I was really, really interested in the Stephen King books I loved so much as a kid, where they're a little bit more immersive, I can't write at Stephen King length, maybe 10 or 15 years from now, I can try to write a door stopper and I might be allowed
Yeah.
to. If I would even want to, I'm not sure. But I just wanted to like lean in that direction a little bit. And Coleman I wanted him to be very different from Jorie. I wanted him and Jorie to not know each other at all. They have nothing to do with each other. That way I could kind of approach it like two short novels that are slowly approaching each other and blending into the novel that it actually ends up being. So, so as most of the characters are connected with Jory, and then off to the side, there's this man Coleman who's older than everybody else, or almost everybody else, and he's going through a much different set of difficulties. And I wanted him to be someone you would never expect to be involved in a story like this,
Yeah.
because I've kind of set up this framework of this cult horror movie that is rumored to have an occult ritual embedded inside of it, where the watching of the movie actually causes something occult to occur. Meanwhile, there's this other man in a completely different state, um, who is drawn into this story, although he has no idea why. As the book starts, he's never even seen the movie Proof of Demons, so he has no idea what it is or why there would be a sequel to it. Um, but that was really interesting to me. It's like here I had a cast of characters who were very educated and passionate about horror, but I also wanted this contrasting character who had nothing to do with horror. And you meet him and you might even scratch your head a little bit like, who is this guy? What's the
Yeah.
point of this guy? And you don't have to wait too long before Proof of Demons shows up and you're like, okay, well, there's definitely a connection. I'll see where this goes. I'm only 4 pages into his story and there's already something happening to him that relates to Jory in some way. um, but he's dealing with his own very serious problems, and suddenly he has this other serious problem thrown onto him. So I just thought it was really interesting to have kind of a second protagonist that you're wondering when they're going to meet the primary protagonist, how that's going to happen, why that's going to happen, who's behind all this, what is their big master plan, and how does Coleman tie into it? Because you know early on why Jory ties into it. So you're just gonna there's a little bit of a mystery involved in why Coleman is drawn into it.
Uh-huh. I don't want to give it away, but did you know how they were going to converge in the end very early on, or did you kind of try? Do you tend to try and surprise yourself when you're writing and you brought the two stories together as you were writing the story?
Well, one thing I learned writing a novel as compared to writing short stories and even short novellas is that you can't just wing it. So like that's actually one of the things I knew earliest. I knew how and why they were going to converge. It's just like the exact timeline, the exact details. I figured out some of those along the way, but like the main reason was there pretty much from the beginning. Like I said, I was thinking of it as a little bit like two novels that are on a collision course, and So I had that ultimate destination in mind for
Mhm.
sure.
Brilliant. No, and that works really well. I mean, that was why I loved the same film again, Weapons, because it has like three or four stories going on at the same timeline, and they all come together. And when they do, it just explodes, and it works brilliantly. The same as the book. So yeah, so fans of Weapons are definitely in for a ride with this one. Yeah,
Yeah, I mean, I only saw Weapons like 2 months ago, but you're right. I should use that as a recent
marketing.
example
Yeah,
of something that does something that's kind of similar.
does something similar. Yeah. Uh-huh. I saw also the book. It kind of it delves into the internet, which is kind of brave because a lot of especially horror writers, they prefer not to talk about technology, telephones, the internet, because it kind of a lot of horror fans tend to kind of not really be interested in that unless it's got a kind of something to give. And this one really does. And it poses a really good question. It's actually written, I think it's in one of the kind of the Reddit posts that you have in the book, where it says, um, "Are urban legends dangerous in the post-truth era?" So I'm quite curious where that idea came from. Was you specifically was that just kind of something you came up with, or were you specifically trying to um, bring in a kind of cutting commentary about the post-truth era and kind of these competing narratives at the moment, or is that something that I completely read between the lines and you weren't kind of trying to explicitly talk about that in the book?
I knew it would be important, and I knew it would probably be the one theme that was, held up as what the book is about.
Yeah,
Um, just like I said, I wanted the book to be about horror fandom and the love of the genre and just that joy that we all have inside of us. Um, I the only way I could avoid the internet would be to set the book in the 1980s or something,
sure. Yeah.
which, I love books that are set in the past. I just didn't want this one to be set in the past. So,
I don't think it would have worked in the past because of things that happen in the story that would could only happen if we are all interconnected.
right, like if I said it back then, it would just be a bunch of VHS tapes, and
Yeah. Some
that's
dodgy
really
scream phone calls. Yeah.
right. So I knew that this story would have to heavily involve uh, things that are online, which made sense to me because horror fandom is online now. When I was really young, especially when I was a kid, being a fan of horror was a very lonely thing. It was very solitary. It's just something I did by myself. In my bedroom, I didn't really have any friends who loved horror, so I didn't talk about it with anybody.
Yeah.
I probably would have gotten way more into horror if I had been born at a different time and grown up as like someone in Gen Z or something.
Yeah.
Um, but horror fandom nowadays is all about community, and there are hundreds or thousands or tens of thousands of people that you see or interact with or are on the periphery of when you're on social media and Reddit and places like that where they're your people, they're your tribe. They're people I didn't have when I was young. And so that really interested me. So I really wanted to look at how use that quote you just used, are urban legends dangerous in a post-truth era? Because I had read a lot about the Slender Man stabbings that
Yeah.
took place, was been a lot of years ago now. But the two girls who, stabbed their classmate to death because they believed Slender Man wanted them to. And it's a really interesting story. There's a documentary out there about it that's pretty good. Um, so I was really interested in, there's the way Slender Man came into pop culture in the first place. And then there are these two girls who committed this tragic act because of this urban legend. And then there are all the other urban legends that we know.
Yeah,
And
the book reminded me also of the Elise. I don't know if you know the Elisa Lam story, the one that went up in the elevator and she pressed the buttons with the kind of the elevator ritual where they have to press certain numbers, certain floors, and then she disappeared. That was another one that came to mind when I was reading the book. Yeah,
I'll have to look into that one. I'm going to write that down.
Elisa Lam. Yeah,
Um, so I was just thinking a lot about how in the internet era, urban legends would obviously develop very differently since, instead of an old campfire stories that people are telling with a flashlight under their face or whatever, you could have thousands of people propagating, adding on little tidbits of information, and something can kind of spiral out of control pretty quickly. And this is essentially what happened to Jorie 10 years before the book starts that made everything fall apart for her and for the her two friends in the October Film Hunt group. But it was really fascinating to me. And I'm not going to get political, but I do want to say that the internet has changed how we communicate with each other, has changed so much about our lives and our brains, our brain chemicals. And
yeah,
it's usually people focus on politics when they're talking about this. But I was really interested in how the concept of belief has changed in the internet age and the social media age. Um, it seems that we know we are in a post-truth era now, and it seems to me that belief is more powerful than truth. So if you believe something, it doesn't really matter whether or not it's true. And yeah, this usually falls into a political arena, and you're usually
yeah,
talking about a certain side when you talk about people who believe things that aren't true. And that's just
yeah.
the fact of it. But I wanted to look at it through more of a horror lens and I guess, a social commentary lens, to see how a rumor can affect not only the group of people who believe it, but could it affect reality itself?
Yeah.
Because if belief defeats truth, then therefore believing in something, again, through a horror construct, believing in something could theoretically give that thing power and allow it to be real in a way.
Hmm.
And
Yeah.
that's really, really fascinated me. And that can only happen through the internet. So I knew that I had to have a certain amount of social media. I knew that I had to have a certain amount of Reddit, and just the Reddit communities in general really fascinate me because there's some really, really great discourse that happens on Reddit, and it's far superior to social media in a lot of cases. You see more intelligence, you see more thoughtfulness, you see more apologies when someone's wrong about something. Like, you really won't ever see someone say, "Oh, I'm sorry, I was wrong.
Yeah.
I'm sorry I said that nasty thing to you." But on Reddit, you're a little more likely to see that kindness, which I
Yeah.
think is really interesting. It's almost like I wanted to honor Reddit by making it a small character in the book. So,
Mhm.
but I knew all these things would have to come into play, and so I just decided to embrace it and not let it spiral into a lot of page count, but just here and there are little moments where the story takes place on Reddit for like one page, or there's half a page of a Twitter dialogue going on, just these little moments just to keep the book rooted in today online, where these terrible things have the potential to go viral and touch the minds of, you know, potentially hundreds of thousands of people, whereas in the past that would have been impossible. And there are certain evil things that would have been powerless in the 1980s, but in the year 2025, they have, unfortunately, massive power to do destruction. So that just that whole, it's a big topic that I could talk about for an hour, but
Oh
just
yeah, no, sure, yeah,
that whole area just like really interested me. But and at the core of it is just this idea of belief versus fact. Which one's gonna win? And I already feel like belief is kind of winning. And I don't know what the future holds if we'll look back one day and say, oh, thank God science is the rule of the law now. And, thank God
yeah,
we base everything on science and fact and verifiable things. But maybe in the future, we'll look back and like, remember facts vaguely. So I don't know. I don't know how it's all gonna end up, but that's kind of how I see the moment we're in right now.
yeah. No, it's not. It's looking pretty bleak, and that's not even that's without even bringing artificial intelligence into the conversation because that is just going to make belief. It's going to make it even easier for us to believe things because obviously your book doesn't kind of touch on an artificial intelligence at all, but that because there are videos in there, kind of sent videos on over Twitter and whatever, it could quite easily have talked about artificial intelligence and how easy it would be to create the kind of videos that we do see in this book, you know?
Yeah, I'm really glad this book gets to exist in the moment right before AI kind of just rapidly metastasized us. Because I would have had to write a lot of things differently. When I first wrote the book, like there was virtually zero AI in our lives.
Yeah.
It was still just a concept.
Just blown up over a year, yeah.
And then when I was in the final round of edits, AI still wasn't important, but you were hearing about it a little bit. And I'm just really grateful that this book gets to be uh, kind of like the epilogue of our lives without AI. Because it would be even grimmer if I had had to write an AI storyline and put AI elements into the book. Because it's really, it's going to take what I've written about and like you just hinted at, it's going to make everything worse.
Yeah,
And truth and science and facts, like they have their work cut out for them.
absolutely. Yeah, but like you said though, I don't want people to think it's a very political book. It's very subtle, but there are certain inklings in there, and I think it worked brilliantly. And like I said, it had me thinking a little bit about what if AI existed, and to talk about these videos that we do see in the book that AI would make it was so much worse, even more so. Maybe a sequel there, I don't know. But yeah, it just worked really well. Yeah, so yeah,
Thank you.
um, it also yeah a little bit coupled to that. It deals with a lot of kind of digital mythologizing, especially kind of about the supernatural. Was all of that also kind of did that kind of grow out of what we've just been talking about? Or was that something that you wanted to do right from the very beginning because of the kind of the things that you found these you mentioned the Slender Man story, for example.
Yeah, I mean it kind of both. It's kind of something I thought about beforehand, and then it was strengthened as I was, writing about the way urban legends would be treated and be spread online. Because um like Carl Sagan, the astrophysicist, he wrote a book once, Candle in the Dark. I can't remember the subtitle, but there's actually an epigraph in the October Film Hunt that's a quote from his book, and he talks about how, we've had a scientific enlightenment, but he envisioned a world where we would turn our backs on it. And he actually uses the word demons, which was part of the inspiration for like the the title of the film, Proof of Demons, that's in the book, because it kind of felt Sagan-esque, and I liked how it sounded kind of academic,
Yeah.
like a horror movie with a sort of an academic title, which really interested me. It's like, you want proof of demons? Watch this movie, and it kind of kind of gives it another angle of, is this movie real or fiction, you know? But anyway, not to get off on a tangent, but Sagan worried that we would turn our backs on science and facts and kind of drift far, far backward into an era of superstition. And we, we would practically be living in caves again and frightened of the sun. What is that burning thing up in the sky? And we would just lose our sense of surety in the world. And I thought about how, hundreds of years ago, people who are really in the occult, like, or into the occult, in the past, they would, draw figures on the floor. They would find some old musty book and blow the dust off of it and incant a spell of some sort. And I was thinking about how that wouldn't really work that way nowadays. Something that is occult in nature would be spread through technology, and it's just like, The Ring, or the original Ringu film, where a demonic sort of entity was, and a curse was spread through VHS tapes.
Yeah.
It's the same kind of concept there. And, people who are occultists, demons trying to break through into our plane of existence, whatever it may be, they would be more likely to use technology because that's what we use. There aren't very many people out there anymore who are digging through libraries in Eastern Europe trying to uncover these like arcane texts, so
Yeah.
that's starting to seem kind of unrealistic nowadays. Whereas, it's fascinating to think that a demon or a doorway or some sort of power could actually be like in the spools of a film or in the pixels of a digital film or in the pixels on a smartphone screen. The words you're reading on uh Instagram post, there could be something in those words trying to get out, and by reading them, you're helping it in some way. That was really interesting to me. So
Yeah.
it's, you know, the arcane text from 500 years ago is really not that much different than the internet today. It's just a vehicle, it's a means of delivery, and people who are interested in opening portals to forbidden lands or whatever you want to call it, they would they would just go to the internet, because not only do you have potentially different, newer ways to do what you're trying to do, you also have far, far more influence. And going back to that idea of belief, the more people you can get to believe in something, the more strength that's going to have. And you can get on the internet and get a million people to believe something you say, whereas, 50 years ago, you could get like six people to believe what you said.
Yeah. Uh-huh.
And it's
It's
just like,
funny. I mean, sorry, no, I was just going to say that. Sorry to interrupt you. I was just going. It reminded me. I had a conversation with Lamberto Bava. That I'm sure you've seen the film Demons, no?
yes.
And I was speaking to him because like that. I mean, it just reminded me of that his first film, the first Demon, was kind of getting the audience in a cinema theater. Then the next one was through the television, and then he said that he's just written a book, not a screenplay, but an actual book about a third Demons, which would be exactly as you said, to come through the internet, which was
Yeah, man,
exactly the same. Yeah.
I'm in love with anything of that nature. It's so, so interesting to me, because like evil and warfare and propaganda and all these terrible, terrible things, they use the internet like that. That's just the truth of the matter. And they're magnified, they're amplified, they're so much more effective than they were in the past. Just think about how if the Nazis had had social media, what they could
Yeah.
have done. Like and I think we're kind of seeing it now play out in real time, but it's just really scary, scary stuff. And as a horror lover, that's gonna be on my mind for better or
Oh.
worse.
Uh-huh. No, I mean it's honestly that's something I used to be really kind of addicted to my telephone, but I've especially since AI and Chat GPT and all this stuff, I try and keep off of it as much as possible now because you just don't know what you can believe and what you can't believe anymore. It's scary stuff, yeah.
Yeah, if I weren't an author, I very well might just get rid of my phone totally. And it's just, go out and touch grass, as they say
Yeah.
nowadays, because there's you have to be informed. Like you're not a good ally if you're not informed about things, but beyond being informed, just, cut it off there and just try to stay away from the people bickering and screaming. And, we just this past week we saw 24 hours where a group of people was threatening another group of people with zero facts behind it. And then the next day it came out that the people attacking the other people were completely wrong.
Yeah.
And it's like, well, that caused so much damage. And it's just pushing us closer and closer to the edge of that precipice. And like we have to be really careful. Um, but yeah, it's a weird time to go on social media and say, "Hey, my book's coming out," when all these terrible things are just everywhere, and it's like at the same time it's like uh, maybe my book will help take your mind off these terrible things, even though they're kind of commenting on some of them.
Yeah. Oh, and you've got to make a living at the same time, and those are the tools that you need to use to get it out there. Otherwise, you just wouldn't sell your book. So, I mean, there's no reason why you shouldn't be doing what you're doing. Yeah, of course.
Plus, I would hope that the October Film Hunt would first and foremost entertain people, but then after that, just make them be a
Relevant,
little bit
relevant,
more
maybe.
careful about how they take in information on the internet, and not to believe everything they see
Yeah.
and everything they read. And with, AI coming onto the scene, it's like everything they hear and everything they watch, like everything is suspect now. And, terrible things can happen when too many people believe the wrong thing. And, my book just shows a supernatural example of that, which, is has a lot of value too. It's one thing to go off and read a vampire book when terrible things are happening to the world. Because like I'd rather read the vampires. They feel comforting compared to all this other stuff, but that has a lot of value. But reading something that's a little more aligned with what's going on in the world also has a lot of value. So as a horror fan, it's a win-win situation, because that's one of the powers of horror, is to comment on the world in all these different ways, subtle ways, direct ways. And just I don't really think any other genre can do it to the extent that horror does it. And that's yet
Yeah.
another reason I love that genre.
No, I love it. Like I said, I love the fact that it's not direct. It's kind of it's subtle, so that you kind of you're reading. It's a story that you're reading. It's fiction, but at the same time, when you've finished reading it, or whilst you're reading it, it really does kind of make you realize and kind of look at the world in a different way and realize, kind of the things that we should kind of be careful with. Yeah, definitely.
Right, exactly. And the main thing is like, what if I were reading about Slender Man and then Slender Man was in my bedroom? That's crazy, there's just the pure entertainment, like get the hairs on your arms to stand up kind of intent behind everything. And my dearest hope is just to unsettle people and scare people, because that's why we started making up scary stories in the first place around fires, thousands of years ago, and that will always be the number one reason to write a scary story and to read a scary story. It's just to feel that visceral, just amazing, incredible feeling where even if you're not someone who jumps at a jump scare, you still get that
Yeah.
almost secret chill and like, yeah, that's the good stuff. And
Uh-huh.
that was my main inspiration writing this book is that horror moment that nothing else can give you.
Yeah. But like I said, I was trying to explain at the beginning. It's once we get to like the final third or so, it kind of shifts gears and kind of goes down a rabbit hole I wasn't expecting it to go. And that's where I got that sensation completely. Yeah.
Good. That's great news.
Uh-huh. So just before I leave you, on a slightly lighter note, I understand that one of the characters is actually, I think you kind of got artistic permission from Trevor Henderson to use him in the book. Can you tell us a little bit about how he got involved and why you decided to base one of your characters around him?
Yeah, the movie and the book that I keep bringing up because it's, the heart of the book, Proof of Demons. There's an entity in the movie that's probably one of the main reasons the movie is so beloved by cult horror fans. So this creature, I was visualizing it in my mind, and I realized two things. One, I wanted the artist who originally created that creature to be a character in the book. That wasn't, and he's the one character that originally wasn't going to be in the book, but I was pretty early on. I was like, no, this is an interesting angle. Um, and it just really felt like the way I was seeing the creature in my head is called the Pine Arch creature. The way I saw the Pine Arch creature in my head, it felt and looked like a Trevor Henderson design. And so that's kind of what I was going with in my head, just as this like kind of vague, menacing, amorphous-ish kind of entity in the background of images and videos and stuff. And then it just hit me one day. I was like, I don't want to write a character based on Trevor Henderson. I want to write Trevor Henderson as the character. So I reached out to him and we had, had some communication in the past. And I know he had read my two story collections. He had actually done illustrations for the second
Right.
collection, The Inconsolables. And so I just kind of pitched him the idea as like, I have this artist character who's very slightly based on you, mainly because I think he would draw this creature the way you would, or paint this creature. What would you think about being the character? And he really loved the idea. So I just made sure that I had certain details of his life that were, accurate. His partner is actually also a character in the book. You see her as well.
Yeah, I think you
And
mentioned that in the acknowledgements. That was I was going to ask you. Is that Jen Woodall? No, is that right?
yeah,
Yeah.
right. And even though she doesn't have a large part to play, wanted to pay tribute to her as well. I didn't want her to be some throwaway person. And even their love for their cat Boo, and that's the real name of their cat. I wanted that to come across, and I wanted it to be fully fleshed. I didn't want it to be just some gimmick. So I guess you could say I researched Trevor a little bit and went back and forth with him. I let him read all the portions of the book that he and Jen were in just to, cover my bases and make sure, you know, he wasn't too nice and wasn't too mean or, all that kind of thing. And it just, from the moment I started doing it, it was fun. It felt like the right thing to do. Um, and whether people know about it before they start reading, as anybody watching this will, or whether they come to that portion of the book and learn about it in the moment. I just think it's a really cool, really interesting take on it.
Mhm. And then just to finish off, I think also we have your parents to thank a lot because they was it they let I don't know if they let you, but you were able to watch The Exorcist. You put it in the end of the book in the acknowledgements. You watched The Exorcist at the very tender young age of 7, I think it was, no?
I was 7. I remember for sure that I was 7, and my mom remembers that too.
And they
But
watched it with you.
no, she
Oh,
did actually, but she doesn't remember the circumstances of how I came to watch it. And, I don't remember I don't remember if it was edited in any way. Because I
right.
don't think they ever played that movie on TV, because even if you edit it down, it's just not really appropriate. Um, but I did watch it when I was 7, and she likes to tell people that she kept an eye on me, and I didn't have any nightmares. I didn't have any trouble going to sleep at night, and it didn't seem to really bother me at all. So she's like, okay, well. And then when I asked to watch another scary movie, she's like, okay, let's see if this one bothers you. And so yeah, so from the age of 7, I was kind of already hooked, and I had a giant Freddy Krueger poster right above my bed from the age of like 9 or so.
And at that age, they didn't come across any. If you didn't come across any movies that kind of unsettled you, because like you mentioned Freddy Krueger, I think I watched the first Nightmare on Elm Street when I was 11, and I couldn't sleep for months after watching that movie. But I mean, I really, really, really was disturbed by that.
As far as I know, I've only had one nightmare in my entire life. Like I could have had other ones and then just not remembered them when I woke up. But I kind of feel like a nightmare would be more likely to wake me up and I would remember something about it. But when it wasn't much longer. I wasn't much older than 7, maybe 8, maybe 9. I watched the original Toby Hooper Salem's Lot
Right.
TV movie, and it didn't bother me really, but I did have a vampire nightmare, and I still kind of have pretty clear memories of it. I woke up and these vampires had been chasing me like up flights of stairs, going higher and higher in this huge mansion, and there were holes in the floor I was having to jump over, and it was really scary. But so yeah, you could say
That's
that
really
movie
crazy.
bothered me, but I went right to sleep the next night, no nightmares, the night after that, so forth, and here I am today and never waiting for my next
Really.
nightmare.
So it's quite curious though. If the films don't phase you, I'm quite curious how. I mean, you talked about that kind of that feeling, even if you don't kind of jump in the when there's a jump scare or whatever, you get this kind of this feeling. How, being someone who's not even been phased by The Exorcist at the age of 7, how do you know how to scare an audience? What sensation do you get? What kind of comes to you? And you're like, you know exactly how you, because I mean, I imagine you've got to try and scare yourself to know how to scare the audience, no?
Yeah, it's something I've thought about, and I don't know if I'll ever have a real answer. It's just one part of it is as a writer, I read more horror than I watch. Um, I'm I can be really bad about keeping up with horror movies. I try to watch them when I can, but my partner's not very into them, so
Not a big fan.
the logistics can be tricky sometimes. But I do read a lot of horror, and it's just I'm really, really drawn to writing that has horror built into it, where it's not just the monster and or the killer and the plot-based elements that are frightening. It's just the writing itself can be frightening because it holds a lot of atmosphere, and just a turn of phrase, a sentence, a paragraph can really give me that same almost chill that certain moments in horror movies give me. So that's kind of that's my North Star. I'm really loath to say that I just feel like it's almost like poetry. There's a poetry in that kind of writing where you're trying to scare someone or unsettle someone or creep someone out, and you're using your words to do it.
Yeah.
It's not just you're using your story to do it, you're using your words to do it. You're
100%. Yeah, yeah. It doesn't have to be
and
the
that
best story, but there's just like a way of words when I'm reading books. The books that really creep me out, they know how to press my buttons, and it's all of a sudden I can kind of you can feel the adrenaline because of the way it's written, the way that you kind of it immerses you into the story. Yeah.
so when I write something and I feel like it has that I chose all the right words and locked that into it, that's when I think I've got it, you know. Even though I made it up and it's not scaring me, I feel like I can sense that visceral chill that I've kind of like vacuum sealed into that paragraph or whatever. Um, and then, there I might not jump in movies, but there's some little part of me inside that's jumping when something scary happens. Like I'm not emotionally dead when I'm watching a
Oh
horror
yeah.
film. I'm extremely engaged in it, and my emotions and my mental capacities are all clicking and engaging with everything. And again, kind of like talking about writing on a sentence level and a paragraph level, in a really good horror movie, there's atmosphere too. There's the cinematography, the way shots are framed, the just the ratios, like the lenses that are used. There's so
The
many,
music,
so many
everything.
ways
Yeah.
that a director and a director of photography have to creep you out in ways other than just the threats and the danger and the monsters and the demons and the ghosts. The film itself has a power, and I feel that when I'm watching a horror movie that like really impacts me a lot, and I have a lot of admiration for it. So, sometimes when I'm writing, especially in something like the October Film Hunt, um, I want my writing to have a little bit of a filmic quality to it where, anybody writing a story wants the reader to be able to visualize it in their head, but I want it to have a lot of atmosphere, and I want it to be really vivid and really impactful for them. So those are kind of the things I strive for when I'm writing, to just try to set the reader up to be frightened, to put them in an uncomfortable place where even the smaller things might freak them out a little bit.
Mhm. Brilliant. Well, listen, thank you so much for your time, Mike. I don't want to keep you any longer. We've been chatting for an hour already. Thank you so much for your time. Wish you the best of luck with the book when it comes out at the end of the month. I'm sure it's going to go down really, really well.
I just want to show
Um,
it to quick. Yay.
now, just before I go, I like to ask the question about the artwork. How involved were you with the artwork for this book?
Somewhat involved. I think it's this way at a lot of big publishers. You have a conversation with your editor or maybe even directly with the art team. And you just, share your ideas and your inspirations. You might even show some book covers that you really admire. Um, so there's that initial conversation, and then, you know, this book involves film so much. So we kind of started from a VHS distortion kind of vibe. And,
Yeah.
so that was the initial sharing back and forth of ideas. And then from there, it was just they did their thing, and a couple of rounds of design, and they were already like so close to this amazing cover that they ended up with. I'm like really, really, really happy with it. Just on a color basis, it's I
Yeah.
I love it so much. It just like it really pops at you.
Yeah.
And my second collection of stories, which was my previous book, like I did the cover myself. So it was
Yeah.
a totally different experience coming to this bigger publisher. There's not just one artist, but like multiple artists working on it. It was really educational and a lot easier than doing my own cover. So
Brilliant. Well, listen, a huge congratulations on the book. Like I said, I love it to bits. I'm going to recommend it to everybody. Have a great release. I imagine you're going on a kind of a small tour or something to promote the book a bit.
No, I'm not really able. I
Oh,
just don't really have space in my life to do a
right,
tour. I talked about it with my editor, and it's my debut novel, so I think I'll save up all that stuff for my second book,
right.
which hopefully will come out next year. Because it's already written. We're already in the
All right.
editing phase. So, um, I considered it a lot, but it's not a good time for me to do a book tour.
Yeah.
I'll wait until it's a better time. So I'm just doing a launch event in my own city in the Atlanta area.
Uh-huh.
So I'm excited about that, and I'll just be online talking about the book. So
Uh-huh. Brilliant. Well, listen, have a great launch day. I'm sure it's going to go down really, really well. I'll keep you updated when this goes live. And thanks so much for your time. And I can't wait to speak to you about this next book you just mentioned.
great. I look forward to it, and
All right.
thank you.
Really nice to speak to you.
Great,
Nice to meet you,
great,
sir.
great conversation. I loved it. Thank you.
Thanks, man. Take care of yourself. Speak soon. Bye.